I was 63 years old when I realized I had raised a thief. Not the kind of thief you read about in the news, not someone who breaks into houses or steals cars. My son, David, was a quiet thief. The kind who steals with your trust. The kind who steals with your love. And somewhere in that theft, he stole the last 30 years of my life. If you've ever felt the ground disappear beneath your feet, that moment where everything you thought was solid suddenly becomes vapor, then you might understand what the next few months of my life became. And I want you to sit with me through this. If you're watching right now and you know what betrayal feels like, I want you to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Because stories like this, they mean something when we share them together. And check the description box below, there are more stories exactly like this one waiting for you. Stories about people like me. People who got back up. But let me start at the beginning. My marriage ended when I was 42. It wasn't one of those dramatic, sudden endings, it was the slow kind. The kind where you wake up one morning and realize the person next to you is a stranger wearing your husband's face. Robert was a good provider. He wasn't cruel. He just wasn't there. Not really. He'd come home, eat dinner, watch television, and disappear into his own world. When he finally told me he wanted out, I almost felt relieved. Almost. David was 12 years old. My beautiful boy with his father's dark eyes and my stubborn chin. He cried for 3 days straight after the divorce was finalized. I remember holding him in his room, both of us sitting on the edge of his bed, and he kept asking me why Daddy didn't want to see him anymore. I didn't have an answer. Robert eventually developed a pattern of seeing David every other weekend, a pattern he mostly followed, though there were times he cancelled last minute for reasons that grew increasingly vague. I raised David alone after that. I worked as a dental hygienist, a career that kept me on my feet for 10 hours a day, my hands in other people's mouths, my own life on hold. But I made good money. Solid money. The kind of money that let me give David a decent life. We had a small house in suburban Connecticut, nothing fancy, but it was ours. I made his favorite meals. I drove him to Little League practice. I sat in the bleachers and watched him play. I helped him with his homework. I showed up. And I saved. God, how I saved. Every extra dollar went into a savings account that I watched like a hawk. I had a plan, you see. I told myself that I was saving for David's college fund, for his future, for the things he'd need when he became a man. But somewhere deep down, I think I was also saving for myself. For the day when I could finally rest. When I could finally stop running. David grew up. He was a good kid, not perfect, but good. He wasn't the type to get into trouble. He didn't drink or do drugs. He got decent grades. He was quiet, thoughtful, introspective in a way that sometimes worried me. His therapist, yes, I put him in therapy after the divorce, said it was normal. He was processing, she said. He was adjusting. By the time David was 25, he was working in IT, making decent money himself. He met Jennifer when he was 27. She was blonde, pretty in a conventional way, and she had this laugh that filled up rooms. I remember when David first brought her home for dinner. I made this elaborate meal, roasted chicken with herbs, mashed potatoes from scratch, fresh green beans. I wanted her to see that I could provide, that I had tasted something of a full life, that I wasn't just a woman on the other side of a divorce. Jennifer seemed nice enough. She was polite to me, asked me questions about my work, laughed at my jokes. But there was something about her that felt performative. Like she was playing a part. I mentioned this to David once, and he got defensive. He said I was being judgmental, that I always did this with his girlfriends, that I needed to learn to let him live his own life. That stung. Because I had spent so many years trying to give him freedom while also being present. Trying to be both a mother and a father. Trying not to be the kind of parent who clung too tightly. They got married when David was 29. I wore a blue dress to the wedding. I remember standing in the back of the church, watching my son make a vow to another woman, and feeling both proud and terrified. Proud that he had found someone. Terrified that I was being replaced. After the wedding, David and Jennifer moved into a house about 40 minutes from me. Jennifer's mother, Patricia, lived nearby as well. She was a formidable woman, tall, with perfectly coiffed grey hair and the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to command a room. She had opinions about everything. About David's career choices. About how Jennifer should decorate their home. About how I should probably think about retirement, given my age. But I didn't retire. I kept working. I kept saving. And every month, I'd check my savings account and watch the number grow. It had become almost a meditation for me, a way of marking time, a way of proving that I still had value, that I was still building something. Then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was at the dentist's office, cleaning the teeth of a woman who kept talking about her grandson, and my phone buzzed in my locker. I didn't check it until I finished with my patient. I had a policy about that. Be present for people. Be there. It was one of the things I was proud of about myself. The call was from my bank. The person on the other end was professional, polite, but her words made no sense. They kept coming at me in a jumbled order, and I had to ask her to repeat herself. My savings account had been emptied. Every penny. $463,000. Withdrawn in a single transaction 3 days prior. The account was now at zero. I remember leaning against the wall of the employee break room. I remember my coworker, Teresa, asking me if I was okay, if I needed to sit down. I remember my hands shaking so badly that I almost dropped the phone. The bank representative explained that the withdrawal had been made by someone with authorized access to the account. Someone whose name was on the account. My son's name was on the account. I had added him when he was 21 because I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought it would show him that I trusted him. I thought it meant something. I drove to the bank immediately. Told my supervisor I was having a family emergency. Which was true, I suppose, though not in the way she imagined. At the bank, I sat in a small office with a man named Gerald who tried very hard to be sympathetic but mostly looked uncomfortable. He showed me the transaction details on a computer screen. The withdrawal had been made at an ATM downtown. $300,000 in cash. The rest had been transferred to another bank account. An account I didn't recognize. Is this your son's account? Gerald asked gently. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Have you had a conversation with him about this? Gerald asked. No, I said. No, I haven't. My hands felt cold. The rest of the world felt like it was moving in slow motion, and I was watching it from behind glass. I called David from my car in the parking lot. He answered on the third ring. Hey, Mom. What's up? The normalcy of his voice almost broke me. I had to grip the steering wheel to steady myself. David, I need you to explain to me why my savings account has been emptied. There was a pause. A long pause. In that pause, I understood that something in our relationship had fundamentally shifted. In that pause, I felt the first taste of what would eventually become my obsession with revenge. We can talk about this later, Mom. I'm actually kind of busy right now. Busy? David, I'm asking you about $463,000. My entire life savings. I would like to know what happened. Another pause. Then, I used it for something I needed. We can discuss it when you're not being so emotional about it. When I'm not being so emotional. As if my entire future being stolen wasn't reason enough to be emotional. I need you to tell me right now, David. I need you to explain what you did with my money. And that's when he told me. Not with remorse. Not with an explanation. But with the kind of matter-of-fact tone that people use when they're already certain that they're in the right. He said, I took what I needed for my life. You don't need it anyway. You have a job. You can save more. And then he hung up. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the bank for 2 hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, my hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing, feeling absolutely nothing. When I finally drove home, the sun was setting. The sky was the color of bruises. Purple and yellow and blue, all bleeding into each other. I remember thinking that it was beautiful, and hating myself for thinking that. How dare I find beauty in a world that had just collapsed? That night, I called David again. This time, he didn't answer. I called 5 times. He didn't answer. I called Jennifer. She answered on the first ring, and when she heard my voice, she seemed to know exactly why I was calling. She put on that same performative voice she'd used at dinner years before. Oh, Patricia mentioned you might call, she said. We were going to tell you tomorrow. We felt it would be better in person. Tell me what? I asked, though I already knew. David and I are taking a little vacation. We're leaving tomorrow morning. It's something we've been planning for weeks. We're taking my mother, Patricia. It's her birthday trip, really. She's never been to Costa Rica. Costa Rica. My son had stolen my entire life savings to take his wife's mother on a birthday vacation to Costa Rica. That's when I made a decision. That's when something inside me, something I didn't know existed, woke up. I was going to make him sorry. Not just sorry. I was going to destroy him the way he had destroyed me. I was going to take everything from him. And I was going to do it carefully, methodically, with the kind of precision and patience that only comes from genuine, bone-deep rage. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that I never drank, watching the sky shift from black to gray to the pale blue of early morning. My mind was working in ways I didn't recognize. It felt like watching someone else think. Someone sharp. Someone dangerous. By 6 a.m, I had a notebook in front of me and I was writing down everything I knew about David and Jennifer's life. Everything they had told me. Everything I had observed. It was like I was creating evidence for a case that only I was prosecuting. David's job, senior systems analyst at a tech company called Meridian Solutions. Salary, approximately $120,000 a year. Jennifer's job, marketing manager at a pharmaceutical company. Salary, approximately $95,000 a year. Combined household income, roughly $215,000 before taxes. Their house in Westchester, purchased 2 years ago for $520,000 with a mortgage that David had mentioned during a casual conversation. 30-year mortgage at 3.8% interest. Monthly payment approximately $2,400. Their cars, a BMW and a Tesla. I remembered Jennifer mentioning the Tesla was a splurge they had treated themselves to. I pulled up the car's approximate value online. $75,000. Their vacations, this was the trip to Costa Rica, but there had been others. I remembered Jennifer posting photos on Instagram from the Caribbean just last year. Cancun. Tulum. Always expensive resorts. Always the kind of trips that required serious money. Their credit cards, I didn't know which ones, or how much they owed, but I knew they had them. Jennifer was the type of woman who believed that more stuff made you more happy. I remembered her showing me her new designer bags. $1,200. For a bag. A bag. By 7 a.m, I had decided that I needed more information. I needed to understand the full scope of their financial life. And I needed to do it in a way that wouldn't raise alarm bells. I called in sick to work for the week. I told my supervisor that I was having some health issues and needed time to rest. She was sympathetic. She told me to take care of myself. She told me that my health was the most important thing. If only she knew. I spent that week doing research. Deep research. I learned about David's company, looked up their public financial information, read news articles about their recent contracts, understood the trajectory of his career. I learned about Jennifer's pharmaceutical company, understood their market position, read about recent layoffs and restructuring. I spent time outside their house. I know this sounds extreme. I know this sounds like the kind of thing that might worry people. But I was past caring about what people thought. I was like a woman possessed. And maybe I was. Maybe somewhere in me, something had possessed me. A ghost of myself. A version of me that I had been suppressing for 40 years. I watched them. I watched David leaving for work in the morning, dressed in his business casual clothes, looking comfortable. Looking like a man who believed he was doing nothing wrong. I watched Jennifer arriving home in her black BMW, parking in the driveway with a kind of aggressive precision. I watched Patricia's car arriving on a Saturday, watched her emerging with grocery bags, letting herself into their house like she owned it. I documented everything. Times. Dates. What they were wearing. What they were buying. On Thursday of that week, I saw them loading their cars. David was putting suitcases into the trunk of the BMW. Jennifer was carrying a small duffel bag. And then Patricia emerged from the house with 2 large suitcases. They were all smiling. They were all laughing. Patricia said something that made Jennifer throw her head back and laugh. David put his arm around his wife and kissed the top of her head. Looking at them, feeling the white-hot fury course through my veins, I understood something fundamental about revenge. It's not about the act. It's about the prelude. It's about the knowledge that you're going to hurt someone and watching them go about their life completely unaware. That's where the real satisfaction lies. In the anticipation. In the power you have over someone who doesn't know you're holding it. They left early Friday morning. I drove past their house and watched them pile into the car. Then I went home and got to work. First, I called a private investigator named Robert Caldwell. I had found him online, a man in his 60s who advertised thorough investigation for family matters. I met with him in a coffee shop, and I laid out what I wanted. I need to understand everything about my son's financial situation, I told him. His accounts. His debts. His credit cards. Everything. Robert was a professional. He didn't ask too many questions. Or maybe he did, and I just wasn't listening. I was too focused on the endgame. This is going to take some time, he said. And it's going to cost money. Money is not an object, I said. And I meant it. I had gotten a line of credit against my house. In a moment of clarity that I'm still not sure wasn't just another form of insanity, I had been strategic about this. I had taken out $50,000. Enough to fund an investigation. Enough to fund what I was beginning to understand was going to be a months-long project. Robert found things out. Things that made my understanding of my son's character even darker. David and Jennifer's credit card debt, $135,000. Their house mortgage, still $490,000 outstanding. Patricia's financial situation, she was actually struggling. Social Security, a small pension from a teaching career that had ended 15 years ago, and increasingly, she was relying on David and Jennifer to help her with living expenses. There was something almost poetic about that last detail. Patricia, who had acted like she was better than me, who had made subtle comments about my choices and my life, was actually in financial trouble. And David had stolen from his mother to help his wife's mother. Wait. What? That's what people would say in a moment like this. Wait, what? That doesn't make sense. Why would he steal from his own mother to help his wife's mother if Patricia was struggling? The answer was depressingly human. Because Patricia had asked him to. Because Jennifer had asked him to help her mother with the birthday trip. And because David, my son, who I had raised to be good, had already developed the kind of moral flexibility that allowed him to steal from his own mother to make his wife happy. I spent weeks in this state of intense focus. I barely ate. I barely slept. I went to work and I smiled at my patients and I cleaned their teeth and I acted like a functional person. But inside, I was thinking about revenge. Constantly. Obsessively. I thought about ruining him financially. I thought about calling his company and telling them about his theft. I thought about going to the police. But those options felt too simple. Too clean. They didn't feel like justice. They just felt like consequences. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to lose something precious. I wanted him to experience the same helplessness I was experiencing. The same rage. The same desperation. And then, one night, while I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I had an idea. An idea so perfect, so precise, that I knew immediately that it was what I had been building toward. I didn't just want to hurt David. I wanted to take from him the thing that had made him feel like he had the right to take from me. I wanted to destroy his relationship with Jennifer. I wanted to make him know betrayal. The first thing I did was create an email address. It was a burner email, the kind of thing I had read about on the internet. The kind of thing I had never thought I would actually do. But here I was, 63 years old, creating fake email addresses like I was some kind of criminal. I called it jennifer.fisherpoint2025@gmail.com. I used a photograph I found online of a blonde woman who vaguely resembled Jennifer but wasn't her. I created a fake LinkedIn profile. I made it look legitimate. I made it look like a woman in her mid-30s who worked in marketing and had recently moved to the area. Then I began to research Jennifer's vulnerabilities. And this is where I discovered something about my daughter-in-law that I hadn't known before, but that made perfect sense once I understood it. Jennifer was insecure about her marriage. She had posted on Instagram about how much she loved David. But she had also made subtle comments about how he worked too much. About how he wasn't as attentive as he used to be. About how he was spending more time at work and less time with her. These were the kinds of posts that people made when they were trying to convince themselves, and the world, that things were fine when they weren't. More importantly, I found evidence through Robert's investigation that David had been spending time outside the marriage. Nothing explicitly infidelity level, but close. He had been going out for drinks after work with someone named Amanda from his company. According to the credit card statements, They had gone to expensive restaurants. Several of them. And Jennifer wasn't mentioned as being there. This was my opening. I waited until they returned from Costa Rica. I waited for them to post photos of their trip, to brag about their vacation on social media, to show the world that everything was perfect. They posted pictures of sunset beaches. Pictures of Patricia with a cocktail in her hand. Pictures of David and Jennifer in matching outfits at some expensive resort. The captions were filled with hashtags. #FamilyFirst, #Costa Rica Dreams, #Paradise Found. I felt my stomach turn. Then I began my operation. I created a Facebook account under the fake name Jennifer Fisher. I made it look realistic, added friends who were fictional marketing professionals, joined groups related to marketing and lifestyle, posted occasional content that I stole from other people's pages. Then I sent David a friend request. It took him 3 weeks to accept it. 3 weeks of waiting. 3 weeks where I checked my fake account obsessively, like a junkie waiting for a fix. And then, one Thursday evening, he accepted. I waited another week before I made contact. The message was carefully crafted. I had written dozens of versions before I settled on the final one. It needed to seem genuine. It needed to trigger something in him. It needed to make him want to respond. Hi David, I'm not sure if you remember me from the Meridian office party last year. We talked for a while about the new tech stack they're implementing. I know you were talking about moving to the cloud, and I was working on something similar at my company. I stumbled across your profile and thought it would be good to reconnect about some ideas I've had. Hope you're doing well. It was generic enough to seem real. It referenced enough specifics about his company that it seemed like I actually knew him. And it had a hook, collaboration. The promise of professional value. He responded the next morning. Hi Jennifer. Yeah, I think I remember meeting you. How have you been? Always good to talk about tech stuff. Feel free to send me some details about what you're working on. I had him. The next message was slightly more personal. Thanks for getting back to me. You know, I'm still at my company, but honestly, I've been thinking a lot about making a change. I've had a rough few months. Work stuff, but also personal stuff. It's hard to explain. I think being around people who understand the tech world is important to me right now. Do you ever do drinks after work? I could use someone to talk to about these industry changes. It was a risk. But it was exactly the kind of thing that would appeal to someone like David. A woman who seemed to need him, who seemed interested in him, who seemed to understand him in a way that maybe his wife didn't. He didn't respond right away. I watched my phone, checking the fake email account dozens of times an hour. I was at work, cleaning people's teeth, and inside my head, I was thinking about David reading my message. I was thinking about him wondering who this woman was. I was thinking about him making a decision that would change everything. He responded 3 days later. I'd be interested in grabbing drinks. There's a bar downtown that I sometimes go to after work. The Tavern on 5th. Do you know it? The Tavern on 5th. The same place where he had allegedly gone with Amanda from his company. I knew it. I set the meeting for a Thursday night, 2 weeks out. This gave me time to prepare. Time to research the bar. Time to understand its layout. Time to create a false narrative about who I was and why I was there. But there was something I needed to do before the meeting. I needed to make sure Jennifer knew about it. I created another fake account, this time a male account under the name Robert Matthews. I made him look like a friend from David's company. Casual photos, just enough information to seem real, not so much that it seemed like a full identity. Then I sent Jennifer a message from Robert Matthews, commenting on one of her Instagram photos. Just a casual, friendly message. Your Costa Rica photos look amazing. You guys are living the dream. Jennifer responded with an emoji and a thank you. Just enough of an engagement to seem natural. I waited another week. Then, from Robert Matthews' account, I sent her a message with a screenshot of something I had fabricated. It was a screenshot of a text conversation, supposedly between Robert Matthews and David, where David was saying things like, Jennifer's been so busy with work, I just need some space to decompress, and I'm going out for drinks with Jennifer Fisher from work, she gets it, you know. The screenshot was brilliant, if I do say so myself. I had used a font that matched iPhone text messages. I had made it look completely authentic. I had taken my time with every detail. Jennifer's response was almost immediate. And it was a message to David. I knew this because David, panicked and confused, responded to my fake Jennifer Fisher account with increasing frequency over the next few days. Hey, are we still on for Thursday? I asked him. Yeah, definitely. I could use it, he responded. And then he added, Jennifer, my wife, she's been weird lately. I don't know what's going on with her. I think she's been looking at my phone or something. Did you message her? This was the moment. This was where I could either continue or pull back. This was where I could still pretend this was all some kind of game, some kind of therapeutic fantasy I was indulging. But I didn't pull back. No, I haven't messaged her. Should I? I asked. There was a long pause. No, don't do that. Let's just meet up. I need to talk to someone who isn't involved in all this. And there it was. In that message, my son had admitted to exactly what I needed him to admit to. He had a problem in his marriage. He had emotional distance from his wife. And he was ready to talk about it with a woman he barely knew. A woman who was, in fact, his own mother in disguise, methodically tearing apart his life. The Tuesday before the Thursday meeting, David called me. His real mother. His actual mother. The woman whose life he had stolen. Hey, Mom, he said, and his voice sounded different. It sounded like it used to sound when he was younger. Like it belonged to a person I recognized. Hi, honey, I said. And in that moment, I almost stopped. I almost told him what I was doing. I almost came clean. But I didn't. How have you been? I asked instead. How was the vacation? Costa Rica was really nice, he said. It was good for us. We needed that. The we struck me. The idea that his marriage had needed a vacation funded by money stolen from his mother. I'm glad, I said. How's Jennifer? She's good, he said. But then he paused. Actually, Mom, she's been a little weird lately. I think something's bothering her, but I can't figure out what. Have you talked to her recently? No, I said. I haven't. Is everything okay? I think so. I don't know. She's just been suspicious about stuff. About my work. About my friends. I'm not sure what I did, but she seems upset. Maybe you should talk to her, I suggested. Ask her what's wrong. Yeah, he said. Yeah, maybe I will. After we hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand and I felt something shift inside me. For just a moment, I felt something that might have been regret. But I pushed it away. I had come too far. I had invested too much of myself in this revenge. I couldn't stop now. Thursday came. I walked into the tavern on 5th at 6:30 in the evening. I had spent the entire day preparing. I had my hair done. I had bought new clothes. I had had my nails professionally done for the first time in 5 years. I looked like a woman in her late 30s, not a woman in her 60s who was orchestrating psychological warfare against her own son. The bar was dimly lit, with exposed brick walls and a long wooden counter. There were people scattered throughout, young professionals, couples, some older men who looked like regulars. I chose a table in the back, angled so I could see the entrance but wasn't too visible from the door. David arrived at 6:45. He was 10 minutes early, which told me something. He was nervous. He was anticipating this meeting. He was looking for something or someone. He sat at the bar and ordered a drink. A bourbon. Neat. I watched him from my table, this man who I had created, who I had fed and clothed and raised with my own hands, and who had stolen everything from me. At exactly 6:55, I stood up and walked over to the bar. David. I said. He turned around, and for a moment, his face was blank. Then he seemed to recalibrate, and a smile appeared on his face. But it was the wrong kind of smile. It was the smile of someone who was looking at an attractive woman. It was the smile of a man who was interested in something illicit. Jennifer. He said. Hey, wow, it's really good to see you. I sat down on the stool next to him, and I watched as his eyes tracked down my body and back up to my face. I was wearing a black dress that I had bought for no particular reason 5 years ago. I was wearing makeup. I was wearing a version of myself that I had never shown my son. You look amazing, he said. I didn't remember you looking so. I mean, you're just really beautiful. This was what he was. This was what I had created. A man who was willing to compliment another woman in a way that was just slightly too sexual. A man whose marriage was apparently not enough for him. We talked. Or rather, I listened and asked questions, and he talked. He talked about his work, about the pressures of his job, about his boss, about his company's upcoming merger. He talked about feeling trapped between expectations, his wife's expectations, his mother-in-law's expectations, his own expectations of himself. He didn't mention me. His actual mother. The woman whose savings account he had emptied. 3 drinks in, and he was loosening up. His hand was dangerously close to mine on the bar. His eyes were spending less time on my face and more time on my neckline. I should probably go, I said at around 8 o'clock. I don't want to get home too late. Why? He asked. The night's just starting. I don't feel right doing this, I said. And in that moment, I was actually being honest. I didn't feel right. I felt wrong. I felt like I was standing outside of my own body, watching myself do something that I couldn't actually believe I was doing. Doing what? He asked. This. Meeting you like this. I knew you were married when I messaged you. I guess I was hoping that you might be the kind of person who would say no. Who would say that you weren't interested in spending time alone with another woman. I watched as something flickered across his face. Shame, maybe. Or the beginning of understanding. I'm going to go, I continued. And I think you should go home to your wife. I think you should tell her how you've been feeling. And I think you should figure out if you want to be the kind of man who cheats, or if you want to be the kind of man who doesn't. I stood up and I walked toward the door. I didn't look back. I had done what I needed to do. The next morning, Robert, my private investigator, sent me a text. The bar had security cameras. He had, through means I didn't ask about, obtained the footage. It showed David sitting at the bar with a woman. The woman was me, but no one would ever know that. To anyone watching that footage, I was Jennifer Fisher. I was the woman David was about to have an affair with. I sent copies of the footage to my burner email account. Then I sent a link to the video, uploaded to a private server that Robert had set up, to Jennifer's actual email address. The message, sent from the Robert Matthews account, was simple. I thought you should know what your husband is doing when you're at work. The response was immediate. Jennifer called David. Robert, my investigator, had an audio recording app on David's phone that he didn't know about. I listened to the conversation that afternoon, sitting in my car outside of work, eating a sad sandwich from the break room. What the hell is this video? Jennifer was screaming. Who the hell is this woman? I don't know, David was saying, and he actually sounded confused. I don't know who sent this to you. I was meeting with someone from work. It's not what it looks like. It looks like you're flirting with another woman. It looks like you're buying her drinks. It looks like you're having an affair. I'm not having an affair. I met with someone. We talked. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. You're touching her arm. You're looking at her like you want to. Nothing happened, Jennifer. We got drinks. We talked. That's all. She's beautiful, David. Of course you want to cheat with her. Of course you'd rather be with her than with me. And then David said something that I didn't expect. He said, maybe if you spent less time attacking me and more time actually paying attention to me, I wouldn't need to spend time with other people. The line went silent. Then Jennifer hung up. I sat in my car, listening to that conversation on repeat, and I felt something I hadn't felt since I discovered that my savings account was empty. I felt powerful. But power, I was learning, came with a cost. That evening, David showed up at my house. My real house. Where I lived. He didn't call first. He just came. I saw him through the kitchen window, standing on my porch, looking confused and angry and lost all at the same time. I opened the door. David, I said. What are you doing here? Mom, he said, and his voice was shaking. Mom, Jennifer got this video. And I don't know what to do. I don't know what to tell her. And in that moment, I almost confessed. I almost told him everything. I almost said, David, it's me. It was me all along. I set this up because you stole from me. But I didn't. Instead, I let him in. I made him tea. I sat across from him at my kitchen table, and I listened to him explain his crisis like a loving mother would. I didn't interrupt. I didn't judge. I just nodded and expressed sympathy. I don't even know who that woman was, he said. And he was telling the truth, in a way. He didn't know who I was. Not really. Not anymore. What are you going to do? I asked him. I'm going to tell Jennifer that nothing happened. That we just talked. That it's innocent. Do you think she'll believe you? I asked. I don't know, he said. And he looked so young in that moment. So lost. So much like the 12-year-old boy who had cried in my arms when his father left. But I pushed that feeling down. I had come too far to stop now. You should go home, I told him. You should try to make things right with your wife. He left after that. He hugged me, and I let him, even though it felt like a betrayal of myself to allow his arms around me, and he walked out of my house. I watched him drive away, and I felt something crumble inside me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I was too far down the path. The marriage started falling apart 7 days after the bar footage appeared. Jennifer moved into a hotel. She hired a divorce attorney. She told David she couldn't trust him, and once trust is broken, you can't build it back. These weren't my words. These were her words, and I learned them through Robert's surveillance. David was devastated. He called me multiple times over the course of that week, asking for advice, asking for comfort, asking for his mother. And each time he called, I was there for him. I was the supportive parent. The one who listened. The one who seemed to have his best interests at heart. But while I was being his emotional support, I was also orchestrating the next phase of my revenge. I had David's passwords. Robert had obtained them. I knew every account he had. His email. His banking. His social media. Everything. I went through his email methodically. I found messages between him and his boss discussing his performance reviews. I found messages about a promotion he was hoping to get. And I found something else. A draft email, unsent, that he had written to his company's HR department. It was dated 6 months ago. In the email, David was confessing to some minor ethical violations he had committed, nothing criminal, but enough to be concerning. He had been wrestling with whether to come clean. He had never sent it. Using his email account, from a different device, I logged in and I sent it. I sent his confessional email from his own account to his company's HR department. I made it look like he had finally decided to come clean about something that had been bothering him. 3 days later, David's company initiated an investigation. He called me in a panic. Mom, I don't understand what's happening. HR is saying they received an email from me confessing to things I didn't think were that serious. But I didn't send that email. I mean, I wrote it, but I never sent it. That's strange, I said, and my voice was steady and calm. Is it possible you sent it accidentally? I don't think so. I remember specifically not sending it. Well, maybe you were more conflicted about it than you realized. Maybe part of you wanted to come clean. He was quiet for a long moment. Maybe, he said finally, but the timing is awful. Jennifer's already thinking I'm a cheater, and now my company thinks I'm some kind of criminal. I'm sure it will work out, I told him. And I didn't feel like I was lying, exactly. Things would work out. Just not in the way he hoped. The investigation into David's conduct lasted 2 weeks. In the end, the company determined that while he hadn't done anything that violated the law, he had bent some rules around data security protocols. He was demoted. His salary was reduced. And he was placed on a performance improvement plan. It was devastating without being catastrophic. Which is exactly what I had intended. Meanwhile, Jennifer's divorce attorney was requesting his financial statements. And as I had orchestrated, the credit card debt that I had uncovered was becoming a significant issue. David couldn't afford to hire his own attorney. He couldn't afford to split their assets 50-50. He couldn't afford much of anything. He came to me and asked if I could loan him money. I remember standing in my kitchen, listening to my son ask me for money, after he had stolen from me, and I felt the most profound sense of vindication mixed with a darkness that scared me. I don't have any money to loan you, I told him. Remember? I used my savings to invest, and the investments didn't work out. This was a lie. I had invested the $50,000 line of credit, but I still had other savings. I had my income from work. I had a home. I had resources. But I wasn't going to give them to him. I'm sorry, honey, I said. I just can't help. He looked at me with something like betrayal in his eyes. As if he was just now understanding that his mother, me, was not going to be the safety net he thought I was. By week 4 after the bar incident, David had moved into an apartment by himself. A studio in a less desirable part of town. He was paying for an attorney. He was paying for therapy. He had called me to tell me he had started seeing a therapist, which I took as a sign that he was beginning to understand that his actions had consequences. But I wasn't done with him yet. Jennifer's divorce attorney, working on my subtle suggestions that I had somehow planted through various means, requested a complete audit of David's accounts. They wanted to understand where money had gone. They wanted to know if there were hidden assets. During that audit, David's attorney discovered something interesting. They discovered that David had withdrawn $300,000 in cash approximately 2 months before his marriage fell apart. The cash withdrawal. The one he had made to fund his wife's mother's birthday vacation. But the paper trail was fuzzy on where that money had ultimately gone. It looked suspicious. It looked like hidden assets. It looked like David was trying to hide money from his wife in anticipation of a divorce. It was perfect. Jennifer's attorney filed a motion requesting that David's assets be frozen pending the investigation into the mysterious $300,000. David couldn't prove where the money went, because I had made sure the trail was deliberately obscured. He couldn't explain it to his lawyer. He couldn't explain it to his wife. He couldn't explain it to the court. For the first time, David called me and asked directly if I knew anything about the money. David, what are you asking me? I'm asking if you have any idea where that $300,000 went. Because the court is asking me, and I don't know what to tell them. And that's when I made the decision to tell him the truth. Or part of it. David, I said slowly, do you remember when we last had a real conversation? Before everything fell apart? No, he said. I don't. I asked you where my savings account money went. And you told me you needed it for your life. Do you remember that? There was a very long silence. Mom, no. You're not saying. I'm not saying anything. I'm just asking if you remember our conversation. I took that money for the Costa Rica trip, he said quietly. I know I did. But I didn't think it would be a big deal. I thought you wouldn't mind. I thought you'd understand that I needed to do something nice for Jennifer and her family. And now? I asked. And now everything is ruined. My marriage is ruined. My job is ruined. And this money situation is going to destroy whatever's left of my life. I should have felt satisfied in that moment. But instead, I felt something else. Something complicated. Something that felt a lot like pain. I'm sorry, David, I said. And I meant it. Are you sorry because you care about me, or are you sorry because you did something to cause this? He asked. And that was the question, wasn't it? That was the moment where I could have maintained my secrets or I could have been honest. I chose honesty. Partially. I did something, I said. I did something that I thought was justified at the time. Something that felt fair. But I'm not sure anymore if what I did was right. There was a pause. What did you do? He asked. I think you should come over, I said. I think we need to talk in person. He was at my door 40 minutes later. David looked like he hadn't slept in days. He probably hadn't. His face was gaunt, his eyes red-rimmed, his hair uncombed. He was wearing the same clothes he had been wearing when I saw him in the video from the bar, but they were wrinkled now, dirty, like he had slept in them multiple nights. I made him sit at the kitchen table while I made coffee. Real coffee, not the kind I had made for him to drink while I listened to his problems and secretly rejoiced in his suffering. This time, I was making coffee for my son. For the boy I had raised. For the man I had deliberately tried to destroy. I met someone, I told him as I poured the coffee. A woman. A fake woman. There is no Jennifer Fisher. I created her. I created her online, and I used her to set up a meeting with you at the tavern on 5th. I wanted you to feel what I felt when you took my money. I wanted you to experience betrayal. He stared at me like I was speaking a language he didn't understand. What? He said finally. The woman in the video. It wasn't a random woman. It was me. I used a wig, makeup, new clothes. I made myself look young, and I sat next to you at that bar, and I let you flirt with me while your marriage was waiting for you at home. That doesn't make sense, he said. That's not possible. It's very possible. You never really looked at me. You looked at the dress I was wearing and the makeup on my face and the idea of a woman who was interested in you. But you didn't look at me. You didn't really see me." He was quiet for a long time. And then something changed in his expression. Something shifted from confusion to understanding to absolute horror. "That's insane," he said. "That's actually insane, Mom. That's not something a normal person does." "You're right," I said. "A normal person doesn't do that. But I'm not sure I'm a normal person anymore. I'm not sure what I am anymore." "Did you do anything else?" he asked, and his voice was so quiet I could barely hear it. "Did you do anything else to me?" I could have lied. I could have told him that was the extent of it. I could have let him have just one piece of innocence left. But I had come this far into the darkness. I might as well see all of it. "I sent your confession email to HR, I said. "I didn't write it. You wrote it. But you never sent it. I sent it from your account." "The email about the data protocol violations?" "Yes." "So the investigation, the demotion, the performance plan, that was all. That was all because you broke your own ethical code and confessed to it." He stood up from the table. He walked to the window and looked out at my small, ordinary backyard. For several minutes, he didn't say anything. "Why did you tell me?" he finally asked. "You could have let me spend the rest of my life wondering what happened. You could have kept your secret." "Because I'm your mother," I said. And it was the most honest thing I had said in months. "Because somewhere underneath all of this rage and hurt and anger, I still love you. And I couldn't let you destroy yourself without at least giving you the truth." He turned to look at me. There were tears streaming down his face. "I took your money," he said. "I stole from you. I deserve some of this." "Maybe," I said. "But do you deserve all of it? Do you deserve to lose your job and your marriage and your future because of one terrible decision? Did I deserve to have my life torn apart by my own mother?" And that was the question. That was the thing that I still don't have a good answer to, even now, looking back on all of this from a place of time and distance. "No," I said finally. "No, you didn't. But I did it anyway, and now we have to figure out how to move forward." He sat back down at the table. He put his head in his hands. And he wept. I don't remember how long we sat there. Time felt strange and elastic. Eventually, he looked up at me. "I need you to tell Jennifer," he said. "Tell her what?" "Tell her that nothing happened between us at the bar. Tell her about this. Tell her that you did all of this to me. If I do that, she'll think I'm a vindictive psychopath who destroyed my own son's marriage and career." "You did destroy my marriage and career," he said flatly. "Why would the truth be worse than the lie?" "Because the lie is forgivable. An affair is forgivable, given enough time and counseling. But a mother who deliberately orchestrates her son's destruction? That's not forgivable. That's not something that can be fixed." David looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Like I was a stranger to him. Which, I suppose, I was. "I'm going to tell her myself," he said. "I'm going to tell her the truth. And then I'm going to see if maybe, just maybe, there's something left of our marriage to salvage. And if there isn't, at least I'll know it failed because of the truth, not because of lies." "And what about me?" I asked. "What happens to me?" "I don't know," he said. "I really don't." He left after that. He stood up, he walked toward my front door, and then he paused. "I'm sorry I took your money," he said without turning around. "I was selfish and ungrateful and I didn't think about how it would affect you. And I know that's not enough. I know I can't take it back. But I'm telling you anyway, because I think you need to hear it." After he left, I sat in my kitchen for hours. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief. I felt hollow. I felt like something had been removed from inside me and I didn't know how to function anymore. The hollow thing was called revenge. And now that it was gone, I didn't know who I was supposed to be. 3 days later, David called me. "Jennifer wants to meet with you," he said. "She wants to hear from you directly what happened. She says she needs to understand before she can decide anything about our marriage." I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near their house. Neutral territory. The kind of place where difficult conversations happen between people who are trying to maintain some level of civility. Jennifer looked different than she did in her Instagram photos. Real. Tired. Scared. She ordered a black coffee and got straight to the point. David told me what you did, she said. He told me about the fake woman and the email to HR and the whole thing. And I need you to explain to me why. I need to understand why you would do this to your own son. I told her everything. I told her about discovering my empty savings account. I told her about the Costa Rica vacation. I told her about the rage and the obsession and the carefully laid plans. You destroyed his life, she said. You destroyed our marriage. Your marriage was already destroyed, I said quietly. David had one foot out the door the moment he went to that bar. Your marriage couldn't survive an actual affair because it couldn't survive the possibility of one. That tells you something about the foundation it was built on. She flinched like I had slapped her. That doesn't give you the right to manipulate him, she said. No, I agreed. It doesn't. I was wrong. I was wrong to do what I did. I was so focused on revenge that I forgot who I was. I forgot that I was supposed to be a mother. I forgot that people make mistakes and that we're supposed to forgive the people we love for their mistakes. Jennifer looked at me for a long moment. I don't forgive you, she said. I know, I said. But David does. David came home last night and he broke down and he told me everything. And he said that you confessed to him. That you chose to tell him the truth. And he said that the person who did those things wasn't his real mother. His real mother is the person who raised him. And his real mother would never willingly hurt him like that. I felt my chest tighten. Is David going to press charges? I asked. No, she said. I begged him to. I told him that what you did was fraud, that it was wire fraud because of the email situation, that you should be prosecuted. But he said that sending his mother to prison wouldn't fix anything. It would just create more pain. So he's not going to press charges. And you? I asked. I'm filing for divorce, she said. But I'm not doing it because of what happened at the bar. I'm doing it because David and I have spent the last 4 years building a marriage on the wrong foundation. We built it on obligation and expectation and not on actual love. And I think I deserve better than that. And I think he deserves better than that too. She stood up to leave. For what it's worth, she said, I think you were a good mother to David for a very long time. And I think you were a good person for a very long time. But people change. And sometimes the person we become isn't the person we wanted to be. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour. I ordered another coffee that I didn't drink. I thought about the woman I had been before my savings account was emptied. I thought about the woman I had become during those months of planning and execution. I thought about the woman I might become from this point forward. It took me 3 months to make a decision about what to do next. During those 3 months, David and Jennifer's divorce was finalized. It was fairly amicable, all things considered. David agreed to take on most of the marital debt. Jennifer got the house. David got the cars, which he immediately sold to pay down the credit cards. He moved into a smaller apartment. He continued his therapy. He accepted his demotion at work, and he began the slow process of rebuilding his professional reputation. And he didn't contact me. I understood. I had destroyed his marriage. I had sabotaged his career. I had turned him into someone he didn't recognize. Even though he had forgiven me, he needed space from me. He needed to understand who he was without his mother in his life. It was the right thing. And it was the thing that broke me. I went through my own period of darkness. I called in sick to work repeatedly. I sat in my house and I stared at walls. I thought about ending it all. I'm being very honest now when I say that. I thought about what it would be like to not exist anymore. To be done with being the person who had done those terrible things. But I didn't do it. Because suicide isn't an answer. It's just another way of punishing the people who love you. Instead, I called my therapist. Yes, I had a therapist too. My divorce had been traumatic enough to warrant professional support. And I told her everything. I expected her to be horrified. I expected her to judge me. But she didn't. She listened. And then she said something that changed my perspective. You did a terrible thing, she said. You hurt your son deliberately and methodically. But you're also the person who confessed to your son. You're also the person who chose honesty over continued deception. You're also the person who is now seeking help and trying to understand what led you to become someone capable of such cruelty. That matters. It doesn't erase what you did, but it matters. I started volunteering. I know that sounds like a cliché, the redemption arc where the bad person does community service and becomes good again. But I genuinely needed to do something that wasn't about me. I started working with a local domestic abuse shelter. I worked with women who had been betrayed by the people they loved most. Women who were trying to understand how to move forward after loss and trauma. And I found something in that work that I had lost somewhere along the way. I found myself again. It took 2 years for David to call me. 2 years of silence. 2 years of me wondering if my son would ever speak to me again. "Hi, Mom," he said when I answered. "David," I said, and I couldn't say anything else. I just cried. "I'm calling because I wanted to tell you that I'm getting remarried," he said. "Not to Jennifer. Someone new. Someone I met in therapy. Actually. Her name is Michelle, and she's been through her own trauma, and we decided to rebuild our lives together." "That's wonderful," I managed to say. "I wanted to invite you to the wedding," he said. "But I also want to be clear about something. If you come, you have to understand that I'm still working through what happened between us. I forgive you, but I haven't forgotten. And I need you to know that I've set very clear boundaries about what I'm willing to accept from you going forward." "I understand," I said. "Good," he said. "The wedding is in October. I'll send you an invitation." He hung up after that. I attended the wedding on a beautiful autumn day. David looked genuinely happy. Michelle was a lovely woman, warm and genuine, and clearly someone who could see David for who he really was. During the reception, David pulled me aside. "I want you to know that I told Michelle everything," he said. "About what you did. About the revenge. About all of it. And she said that what matters is that we're both still here. We're both still trying. We're both still capable of choosing different. Are you sure you've forgiven me?" I asked him. "I'm not sure about a lot of things," he said. "But I am sure that holding on to rage the way you did with me, it destroys you from the inside. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to become a person who can't move forward because I'm too busy looking backward. So yes, I've forgiven you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean that things are the same between us. They're not. They might never be. But maybe that's okay. Maybe different can still be good." We hugged. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt like my son wasn't a stranger to me anymore. Over the next few months, we began rebuilding our relationship. Slowly. Carefully. We had coffee once a month. We talked about his job, which had improved significantly after he proved his competence and dedication. We talked about Michelle, and about David's plans to buy a house with her. We didn't talk much about the revenge or the betrayal or the year we lost. But it was there, beneath everything. A scar that would never fully disappear. A reminder of what happens when love and rage collide inside a person and create something toxic. And I learned something profound during this rebuilding process. Revenge is a poison that you think you're giving to someone else, but you're actually drinking it yourself. About a year after David's wedding, I made a decision that surprised me. I wrote down everything. Every detail of my revenge. Every moment of planning, every manipulation, every twisted victory. I wrote about the fake email, the fake woman, the surveillance, the lies. I wrote about how I had felt during the process, the rage, the satisfaction, the slow creeping darkness that had consumed me. And then I submitted my story to a podcast about true crime and human behavior. Why would I do that? That's what you might be asking if you're watching this right now. Why would I publicly confess to something that could have serious legal consequences? Why would I risk my reputation, my career, my freedom? Because I realized something that I think is important for anyone who has ever felt the kind of rage that I felt to understand. Revenge doesn't make you feel better. It makes you feel emptier. And sometimes, the only way to fill that emptiness is to be honest about how you got there. The podcast producer called me the day after I submitted my story. She wanted to meet. She wanted to talk about possibly doing a multi-episode series about my experience. She said it was exactly the kind of human interest story that people needed to hear. I told her I would think about it. I called David and I asked him if he would be okay with me telling my story publicly. "It's your story," he said. "But it's also my story. And it affects Michelle. And it could affect our future children. So I need you to think very carefully about whether you want to put our family under that microscope." He was right, of course. He was absolutely right. Going public with my revenge story would make us all vulnerable. But I also believed, and I still believe, that there's value in stories of darkness and redemption. There's value in showing people that it's possible to do terrible things and still become a better person. There's value in being honest about how broken we can become when we let rage take the wheel. So I declined the podcast. Instead, I started volunteer counseling. I became a peer counselor at the domestic abuse shelter where I was already volunteering. I started talking to women about betrayal and anger and the desire for revenge. And I told them my story. Not all of it. I protected David's privacy and my own, but enough of it. Enough so that they could understand that I wasn't speaking from some theoretical place of safety. I was speaking from experience. One woman, named Catherine, stayed after a session to talk to me privately. "How did you stop?" she asked. "How did you stop wanting revenge?" "I didn't stop wanting it," I told her. "I just realized that the revenge wasn't actually making me feel any better. The person I was hurting most was myself. And my son. And ultimately, the person I loved. And when you realize that, when you really understand that your revenge is destroying the thing you're trying to protect, yourself and your relationships, then maybe you can stop. Or at least, you can start to want to stop." Catherine looked at me with eyes that were full of tears. "My husband left me for my sister," she said. "I've spent 3 years planning how I'm going to destroy him. How I'm going to take everything from him. And I thought I would feel so much better when I did it. But..." I prompted. "But I'm exhausted," she said. "I'm so exhausted from hating him. And I think I might want to stop." "That's the first step," I told her. "Wanting to stop." Over the next few years, I became increasingly invested in helping other women understand that revenge wasn't the answer to betrayal. I started a support group for women who had been deeply hurt by the people they trusted. I shared my story, carefully and honestly, and I helped other women understand that there were better ways to move forward than the path I had taken. My relationship with David continued to improve. Michelle and I developed a genuine friendship. They had a daughter when they had been married for 3 years, and they asked me to be her godmother. Her name is Elizabeth, and she looks exactly like David did when he was a baby. When I hold her, I think about the choices I made. I think about the darkness that consumed me. I think about how close I came to losing everything. One day, when Elizabeth was about 5 years old, she asked me why I didn't visit as often as Michelle's parents did. I looked at David, and he nodded slightly. A permission. A signal that it was okay to be honest with his daughter. "Elizabeth," I said, "when I was younger, I made some choices that hurt people. And I had to spend a lot of time learning how to be better. And part of being better was understanding that sometimes, you have to give people space to heal. And sometimes, you have to be okay with the fact that your relationship might never be the same as it was before you hurt them." She looked up at me with her serious, thoughtful 5-year-old eyes. "Did you hurt my daddy?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I did. I hurt him very badly." "Does he forgive you?" "Yes," I said. "He does." "Then why do you still look sad when you think about it?" Children are brutal in their honesty, aren't they? They see through all of our complicated emotions and get straight to the heart of the matter. "Because," I said slowly, "forgiving yourself is harder than being forgiven. And I'm still working on that." She accepted this answer with the equanimity of a child. She took my hand and led me to show me something she had drawn, a family picture with me in it. And in that moment, I felt something that I hadn't felt in years. I felt hope. The years have continued to unfold. I'm 72 years old now. I've been retired from dental hygiene for 3 years. I've been volunteering full-time at the shelter for the last 5 years. I've helped dozens of women understand that revenge is not the path to healing. I've also done something that I never thought I would do. I've become close with Jennifer again. Not as a daughter-in-law, that relationship is over, but as a person. We occasionally have coffee. We talk about our lives. She's remarried now, to a good man, and she seems genuinely happy. "I forgave you a long time ago," she told me during one of our coffee dates. "But I had to forgive you on my own timeline. And I had to understand that you weren't trying to hurt me specifically. You were trying to hurt him. And that's a distinction that made it easier for me to let go." David and Michelle had another child, a son named James. I babysit occasionally, and I watch these 2 children who know nothing about the darkness that their grandmother once contained. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that they get to know me as the person I've become, not the person I was. But I don't run from my past anymore. I acknowledge it. I own it. And I use it to help others understand that the path of revenge, while seductive and seemingly justified, is ultimately destructive. The thing I want you to understand, if you're watching this right now and if you've felt betrayed by someone you love, is this: you have a choice. You can follow the path I followed. You can spend months or years planning how to destroy the person who hurt you. You can succeed, even. You can engineer situations that bring them suffering. But it will cost you. It will cost you peace. It will cost you your identity. It will cost you the relationships that matter most. And in the end, you'll discover what I discovered: that the person you've destroyed most thoroughly isn't the person who hurt you. It's yourself. The day everything came full circle was an ordinary Tuesday in spring. I was working at the shelter, reviewing paperwork for a new program we were launching. It was work that mattered. Work that I was proud of. Work that felt like redemption in the way that only actions can be. My phone buzzed. An email from Robert Caldwell, my private investigator. I hadn't heard from him in nearly 8 years. Since the revenge was complete and confessed, we had no reason to stay in contact. The email was brief. It said only that he needed to talk to me, and that it was important. I called him immediately. "I'm glad you picked up," he said. "I've been debating whether to reach out to you for weeks." "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing's wrong, exactly," he said. "But I've received a call from someone. A journalist. She's working on a story about ethical violations in the private investigation industry. And she's specifically interested in a case I worked on about 7 years ago." My stomach dropped. "She knows that I was involved in activities that were, let's say, legally questionable," Robert continued. "She's given me the opportunity to tell my side of the story before she publishes. And I need to ask you, are you okay with me being honest about my involvement in your situation?" "What does she want to know?" I asked. "Everything," he said. "The fake identities. The surveillance. The email hacking. She wants to know how I obtained passwords and accessed accounts. She wants to know the full scope of the illegal activity I was hired to conduct." I was silent for a long moment. How bad could this be? I asked. "It could be very bad," he said. "For both of us. I could lose my license. You could face charges. Identity fraud, computer fraud, conspiracy. The statute of limitations hasn't run out on any of this." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "That depends on what you want me to do," he said. "I can claim that I didn't fully understand the scope of what you were asking me to do. I can minimize my involvement. I can make it sound like I was naive and taken advantage of. But I would be lying. You were very clear about what you wanted. And I did it anyway because you were paying me well to do it." I thought about this for a long time. "Tell her the truth," I said. "Tell her everything. I'm tired of hiding." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure?" he asked. "No," I said. "But I'm doing it anyway." The article came out 3 weeks later. It was a comprehensive piece about the private investigation industry and how easy it is to hire someone to cross ethical and legal lines. Robert's story was featured prominently. And so was mine. The journalist had done her homework. She had interviewed David. She had interviewed Jennifer. She had interviewed people who worked at the shelter with me. She had painted a portrait of a woman who had done something terrible and who had spent years trying to atone for it. Within 48 hours, the story had gone viral. I was being called everything from a vindictive psychopath to a cautionary tale about what happens when rage consumes you. The shelter's board of directors called an emergency meeting. I expected them to ask for my resignation. Instead, they asked me to sit down with them. "We've read the article," the board chair said. "We've discussed the implications. And we want you to know that we stand by you. You've done extraordinary work here. You've helped hundreds of women. And while what you did in the past was wrong, your commitment to making amends has been genuine and profound." I was stunned. "I understand if you need to distance yourselves from me," I said. "For the good of the shelter." "We're not going to do that," she said. "But we are going to make some structural changes. We're going to be very public about what you did, and we're going to be very public about your commitment to healing and change. We think it's important for the women we serve to understand that people can do terrible things and still become better. We think your story is powerful and important." But not everyone agreed. The next morning, I received a call from a lawyer. She was representing a group of people who wanted to file charges against me. What charges? I asked, even though I knew. Wire fraud, identity fraud, computer fraud, conspiracy, she said. My clients feel that your actions had a profound negative impact on their lives, and they believe that you should face criminal consequences. How many clients? I asked. 3, she said. Your son, his ex-wife, and the ex-wife's mother. I felt the ground tilt beneath me again. After all these years of thinking I had made peace with what I had done, I was being told that there would be legal consequences. I called David immediately. David, I just got a call from a lawyer. She said you want to press charges against me. That's not my decision, he said. His voice sounded strange. Strained. What do you mean? Patricia, Jennifer's mother, she called me. She said she wanted to press charges against you for fraud and conspiracy. She said that what you did violated her rights, and she wanted justice. And then Jennifer agreed to join her. And they asked if I wanted to be part of it. And you said yes. I said I needed to think about it, he said. But Mom, I need you to understand something. I forgave you privately. But that doesn't mean that what you did wasn't illegal. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't face consequences for your actions. I know that, I said. Do you? He asked, and there was something in his voice that I hadn't heard in years. A note of anger. Do you really understand what you did? You didn't just hurt me. You set a chain of events in motion that hurt my marriage, my career, my entire family. Jennifer struggled with depression for 2 years after the divorce. Patricia became increasingly isolated and bitter. And yes, I forgave you. But forgiveness doesn't mean that actions don't have consequences. I know, I said again. I know that now. I'm going to meet with the lawyer, he said. I'm going to make my own decision about whether I want to pursue this. And I need you to know that my decision might not be the one you want. He hung up after that. I sat in my apartment, because yes, I had downsized to an apartment. The house had been sold years ago, and I waited. I waited for the legal system to decide what to do with me. I waited for my son to decide whether he would stand against me in court. It took 6 weeks for David to call me back. I've decided not to press charges, he said. Thank you, I said, but he cut me off. Let me finish. I'm not pressing charges because I believe that you've genuinely tried to make amends. I'm not pressing charges because I think sending my mother to prison would hurt me more than it would help me. But I want to be very clear. Just because I'm not pressing charges doesn't mean that I think what you did was okay. It doesn't mean that I think you've fully paid for what you did. It means that I'm choosing a different path than the legal system. But you should know that Jennifer and Patricia are still pursuing this. The trial took 18 months to prepare for. 18 months of lawyers and depositions and the careful examination of every crime I had committed. On the day the trial began, I stood in the courthouse hallway and I saw Jennifer for the first time in years. She looked older. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had been carrying a burden for a very long time. I'm sorry, I said to her. I know you are, she said. But sorry doesn't change what happened. The trial was a media circus. The news channels loved it. A woman in her early 70s had orchestrated an elaborate revenge scheme against her own son. It was the kind of story that made people uncomfortable because it showed what ordinary people like them, were capable of doing. I testified. I told the full story. I didn't minimize my actions or make excuses for myself. I owned every single thing I had done. Jennifer testified about how the affair scandal had damaged her reputation at work, how it had caused her to question her judgment, how it had led to the dissolution of her marriage. Patricia testified about how the chain of events had isolated her, how she had lost relationships in her community because of the scandal, how the financial instability had caused her severe stress. And then David testified. He testified that his mother had committed serious crimes against him, that she had violated his privacy and manipulated him and caused him genuine harm. But he also testified that she was a person capable of profound regret and change. I don't think prison would help my mother become a better person, he said on the stand. I think she's already done the hard work of becoming a better person. And I think there's value in that. I think there's more value in rehabilitation than in punishment in this case. The judge was unmoved. She found me guilty on 4 counts: wire fraud, identity fraud, computer fraud, and conspiracy. She sentenced me to 2 years in federal prison, with an additional 5 years of probation upon release. I was 72 years old when I was sentenced to prison. As I was being led away in handcuffs, I looked at David in the courtroom. He was crying. Michelle was holding his hand. And I felt something that I hadn't expected to feel. Relief. Because finally, I was going to pay for what I had done in a concrete, measurable way. Finally, the justice system was going to do what I couldn't do myself. I spent 2 years in federal prison. I'm 68 years old now, and I'm here to tell you that prison changes you. Not in the way that popular media suggests. It's not some magical place where you have a moment of clarity and emerge as a completely transformed person. It's actually much more mundane and much more profound than that. Prison is where you have nothing but time. Nothing but your own thoughts. Nothing but the reality of the consequences you've created. I was housed in a minimum security facility for women. The other inmates knew my story, it had been all over the news, and some of them were fascinated by it. They asked me questions about revenge, about betrayal, about how it felt to hurt someone you loved. And I told them the truth. I told them that it felt like poison. I told them that it felt like power and like weakness at the same time. I told them that it solved nothing and destroyed everything. I also worked in the prison library. I read books about psychology, about the nature of revenge, about how human beings are capable of extraordinary cruelty when we feel justified in our anger. One book in particular changed my perspective further. It was written by a psychologist who had studied families torn apart by betrayal and revenge. In the book, she discussed how revenge creates a cycle. Betrayal leads to anger leads to revenge leads to deeper betrayal, and the cycle continues. The only way to break the cycle, she argued, was to choose forgiveness. Not easy forgiveness. Not swift forgiveness. But deliberate, painful, slow forgiveness that required you to let go of your right to make the other person suffer. That's what I had done, eventually. But I had come to it through destruction first. And this book made me understand that there could have been another way. A way that didn't require me to lose 2 years of my life to incarceration. David visited me once while I was in prison. He brought Michelle and Elizabeth, who was now 12 years old. She had never seen her grandmother in prison. She looked frightened and sad. I wanted her to understand, David said, that actions have consequences. That even people we love can make terrible choices. Elizabeth asked me why I had done it. And I tried to explain to this 12-year-old girl why her grandmother had become a criminal. I was very hurt, I said. And instead of dealing with my hurt in a healthy way, I let it turn into anger. And I let that anger convince me that I had the right to hurt the person who hurt me. And that was wrong. Do you regret it? She asked. Yes, I said immediately. I regret it every single day. More than Daddy regrets taking your money? She asked, with the unsettling directness of a child. Different kind of regret, I said. But yes. In some ways, more. When I was released from prison, David was there to pick me up. He hugged me in the parking lot. And I cried. Not the tears of someone who had been vindicated or justified, but the tears of someone who had paid her debt and was given a second chance she didn't deserve. What are you going to do now? He asked as we drove. I don't know, I said. I can't volunteer anymore. The shelter won't hire me after prison. I can't work in most mainstream jobs. I'm too old to start over in any traditional sense. You could write, he said. You could tell your story. Not for the media circus or the attention, but to actually help people understand what revenge does to you. And that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. I've written 2 memoirs. The first was about the revenge itself, the detailed, honest account of what I did and why I did it. The second was about the aftermath, about serving time, about learning to live with what I had done, about the possibility of redemption. I've also been quietly mentoring young women who have been victimized by betrayal. Not through any official program, I'm not allowed to do that kind of work anymore, but through one-on-one conversations. I meet with women, and I tell them my story, and I help them understand that there are ways to process betrayal that don't involve becoming a criminal. David and I have rebuilt our relationship. It's different now. There's awareness to it. An acknowledgement that damage occurred and scars remain. But there's also genuine love. And acceptance. And the kind of forgiveness that only comes from truly understanding that the other person has changed and is trying to do better. Last year, David asked me to help him write a book about our experience. He wanted to tell his side of the story, what it was like to be betrayed by his mother, what it was like to go through the revenge, what it was like to eventually forgive. I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. I wasn't sure it was my place. But David was very clear. Your story belongs to you, he said. But it also belongs to me. And it belongs to anyone who's ever been caught in a cycle of betrayal and revenge. I think telling it together, your version and my version, could actually help people. So we're writing a book together. And it's hard. It's hard to relive those years. It's hard to be honest about my culpability while also being honest about David's theft. It's hard to create a narrative that doesn't excuse either of us but also doesn't reduce us to caricatures of good and evil. But it's also healing. For both of us. I'm 78 years old now. I have Elizabeth, who is now 23 and in graduate school studying psychology. I have James, who is 19 and wants to be a teacher. I have David and Michelle, who have been married for 20 years. I have grandchildren who know their grandmother as a person who made mistakes and tried to make amends. I don't have my savings. I don't have my career. I don't have the future I thought I was building for myself. But I have my son. I have my family. I have a life that has meaning because I've chosen to spend it helping others understand the costs of revenge. If you're watching this right now, and if you're feeling what I felt at the moment I discovered my empty savings account, that white-hot rage, that sense of violation, that absolute certainty that the other person needs to suffer, I want you to know something. Revenge will feel justified. It will feel like the only appropriate response. It will feel like justice. But it's not justice. Justice is impartial. Justice doesn't require you to destroy yourself in the process. Revenge is personal. Revenge requires you to become someone you don't recognize. Revenge requires you to pay a price that's often higher than the price the other person pays. There are other ways to respond to betrayal. There's the legal system, imperfect as it is, but designed to handle justice more fairly than a grieving person can. There's therapy, real, professional help to process your anger and grief. There's the possibility of forgiveness, which doesn't mean forgetting or excusing, but rather letting go of your need to punish. My son stole $463,000 from me. That was wrong. That was a serious violation of my trust and my love. And I had every right to pursue justice through the legal system. What I didn't have the right to do was become judge, jury, and executioner. What I didn't have the right to do was destroy another human being, even one who had hurt me, in order to feel powerful again. I made that choice anyway. And I spent 2 years in prison for it. And I will spend the rest of my life living with the consequences of it. But I'm also here to tell you that it's possible to come back from that. It's possible to become a different person. It's possible to have a relationship with your child again, even after you've devastated them. It's possible to find meaning and purpose in trying to help others avoid the path you took. It's not a redemption story in the traditional sense. I'm not a hero. I'm not even entirely blameless. My son did steal from me, and I was right to be angry about that. But I was wrong in how I expressed that anger. And that's the part one want you to understand. Sometimes we're right about being hurt, but wrong about how we respond to that hurt. If I could go back and talk to myself at the moment I discovered my empty savings account, I would tell her this: your pain is real. Your anger is justified. But don't let it consume you. Don't let it turn you into someone you don't recognize. Choose a different path. Choose therapy. Choose the legal system. Choose forgiveness, even if it's premature and feels unfair. Choose anything other than revenge. Because revenge will take everything from you. It will take your identity. It will take your freedom. It will take your relationship with the person you love. And it will leave you hollow. I learned that lesson too late. But I'm telling it to you now, hoping that maybe you'll learn it differently. To my son David, who is watching this, thank you. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for staying in my life even when you had every reason not to. Thank you for helping me become a better version of myself. To Jennifer and Patricia, I know you won't watch this, but I want to say it anyway, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. I'm sorry for the scandal and the doubt and the damage to your lives. I can't undo what I did, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to make sure other women don't follow the path I took. To anyone watching this right now who's been betrayed, if you're feeling like you need revenge, please reach out. Please talk to someone. Please understand that there's a better way to process betrayal than the path I took. And check the description box below for resources. For therapy. For support groups. For people who can help you navigate this without destroying yourself in the process. Because your life is worth more than revenge. Your peace of mind is worth more than making someone else suffer. Your freedom, physical, emotional, spiritual, is worth more than the temporary satisfaction of vengeance. I know this because I paid the price for learning it. And I'm here to tell you that the price is too high. The cost is too great. Choose a different path. Please choose a different path. I'm Patricia, and this has been my story. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here with me through this. If you have your own story about betrayal and revenge and redemption, I want to hear it. Leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Share your story with others who might benefit from knowing that they're not alone. And please, check the description box below for more stories like this one. Stories about people who survived betrayal. Stories about people who found redemption. Stories about people who chose a different path than the one I took. Because stories matter. Connection matters. And knowing that you're not alone in your pain, that matters too. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being willing to sit with me through the darkest parts of my life and come out the other side with me. That means more than you know.